Have you ever walked into a Japanese home and wondered why it feels so calm? It may not be large. In fact, it might be smaller than your living room. But somehow, the counters are clear. The entryway feels orderly. The bathroom doesn't feel damp. And there isn't a pile of random stuff waiting to be dealt with later. For a long time, I assumed the answer was simple. Maybe Japanese people were just more disciplined about cleaning. Maybe they owned less. Maybe minimalism was doing all the work. But the more you look at how Japanese homes are actually organized, the more you realize something else is going on. They aren't simply cleaning harder. In many cases, the home itself is designed to create less mess in the first place, and that changes everything. Think about your own house for a second. How many little problems do you deal with over and over again? A cabinet where things disappear in the back, cables hanging underneath a desk, a bathroom that stays wet long after someone takes a shower, cleaning bottles piled under the sink, shoes spreading dirt past the front door, a counter that somehow becomes cluttered again 2 days after you clear it. None of these problems feels serious on its own, but when you repeat them every day, they quietly steal time and attention. You move something, you wipe something, you search for something, you untangle something, then tomorrow, you do it again. That's the part of Japanese home design I find so interesting. Instead of asking, how can I become better at cleaning this? The better question is often, why does this keep becoming a problem? And then the home is changed around that answer. That's the philosophy behind the 25 ideas we're going to look at today. Some are surprisingly simple. You could copy them with a few hooks, a small organizer, or a different way of using a cabinet. Others come from modern Japanese apartments, high-end bathrooms, compact kitchens, or newer home technology. You probably won't need every one of them. And that's not really the point. The point is to understand the thinking behind them, because once you see the pattern, Japanese organization starts to look very different from ordinary cleaning advice. There are really 3 ideas running underneath almost everything you're about to see. Reduce friction, reduce clutter, reduce maintenance. Reduce friction means making everyday actions easier. If you use something every morning, it shouldn't require opening 3 drawers and moving 4 other things just to reach it. Reduce clutter means giving things a clear place to live, not simply hiding them, but making them easy to see, easy to reach, and most importantly, easy to put back. And reduce maintenance means solving problems before they become chores. If moisture causes mold, improve airflow. If shoes bring dirt inside, stop the dirt at the entrance. If cables constantly become tangled, change the way they're routed. If a deep cabinet becomes a black hole, redesign the cabinet instead of reorganizing the same mess every month. That's a very different way of thinking about a clean home. You're no longer relying on motivation. You're building a home that quietly helps you stay organized. And as we move through these 25 ideas, you'll notice something interesting. At first, they'll seem to be about storage. Then they'll become about movement, then moisture, then cleaning, then how rooms change throughout the day. And by the time we reach number 1, this won't really be a video about drawers, shelves, or clever gadgets anymore. It will be about something much bigger. How the space around you can either keep demanding your attention or quietly give some of it back. So let's start with one of the easiest Japanese ideas to borrow, and it's hiding in a place most of us completely ignore. One of the biggest mistakes people make in a small home is assuming they need more storage. Another cabinet, another shelf, another piece of furniture. But in a lot of Japanese homes, the first question isn't, where can I put something new? It's, what space am I already paying for that isn't doing anything? And once you start looking at a home that way, you notice wasted space everywhere. the inside of a cabinet door, the vertical gap above a drawer, the narrow strip beside a wall, the area underneath a window, even the few inches between shelves that usually serve no purpose at all. Japanese small space design tends to treat those areas as opportunities. Take the inside of a cabinet door. Most of us open that door, reach past it, grab what we need, and close it again. The door itself is basically dead space. But add a simple wire grid, a few hooks, or small hanging containers, and suddenly that flat surface can hold scissors, measuring spoons, cleaning cloths, small tools, or other lightweight items you use all the time. What I like about this idea is that it doesn't really create more space. It makes existing space work harder. And there's another benefit. The things you use most often move closer to eye level. Instead of digging through the back of a drawer, you open the door, and there they are. That may sound like a small improvement, but small improvements matter when you repeat the same action 5 or 10 times a day. The same thinking shows up inside deeper drawers. Deep drawers look useful because they hold a lot, but anyone who has lived with one knows the problem. The front half stays organized. The back half becomes archaeology. You know the thing you need is somewhere back there. You just have to remove 6 other things to find it. One Japanese-inspired solution is to divide that depth into layers using folding or sliding trays. Instead of treating a drawer as one big box, you turn it into multiple levels. The upper tray can hold the things you use most often. The lower section can hold larger or less frequently used items. Everything stays accessible without having to empty the whole drawer. And again, the important idea isn't the specific hardware, it's the principle behind it. If storage forces you to move several things just to reach one thing, that space may be large, but it isn't working very well. Now look at a window. Most people think of a window as either a source of light or a view. But in a compact apartment, the space around that window can sometimes do more. A narrow, retractable shelf beneath the sill can temporarily hold a plant, a cup of coffee, a book, or a few herbs. Then when you don't need it, it disappears. That difference matters, because there's permanent space and there's temporary space. Permanent space is always there. A table takes up floor space whether you're using it or not. A cabinet occupies a wall 24 hours a day. Temporary space only appears when you need it. A fold-down shelf, a pull-out tray, a retractable drawing rack, a movable surface. In a small home, temporary space can be incredibly valuable because you get the function without permanently sacrificing the room. That's one reason folding and retractable solutions show up so often in compact Japanese design. The goal isn't to fill every empty area. It's actually the opposite. You want the space to stay open most of the time, then become useful exactly when you need it. Hidden accessory rails work on the same idea. A narrow rail along a cabinet, wall edge, or other transition area can hold hooks, small racks, or lightweight accessories. When those accessories aren't needed, they can be removed or repositioned. The room goes back to feeling open. And this is where Japanese small space thinking becomes especially useful. Instead of asking one surface to perform one fixed job forever, the surface changes with your needs. A wall can be empty most of the day and become storage for 10 minutes. A window area can become a temporary shelf in the morning and disappear again by lunch. A cabinet door can quietly store tools without taking up another inch of floor space. You don't need custom Japanese cabinetry to copy any of this. Start much smaller. Open one cabinet in your kitchen. Look at the inside of the door. Could 2 adhesive hooks move something off the countertop? Could a small wire grid hold items you're constantly searching for? Look inside a deep drawer. Would one removable tray keep the things you use every day above the things you rarely need? Look at a narrow, unused wall. Could a slim rail or hook system give a few objects a permanent home? The point isn't to cover every wall with storage. That would just create a different kind of clutter. The point is to identify the spaces that already exist and ask them to do a little more. Before you buy another cabinet, another cart, or another shelving unit, take a second look at the home you already have, because small homes don't always need more space. Sometimes they just need fewer wasted surfaces. And once you stop thinking only about square footage and start thinking about how every surface works, even a very small home can begin to feel surprisingly generous. Here's something I've learned about storage over the years. A big cabinet can actually make a small home harder to organize. That sounds backwards, because we usually assume more storage is always better. More shelves, deeper drawers, larger closets, more places to put things. But there's a problem. The deeper the storage gets, the easier it becomes for things to disappear. And once something disappears from view, it slowly disappears from your memory too. You put an extra bottle of cleaner under the sink. A few months later, you forget it's there, so you buy another one. Then another one gets pushed behind that. Eventually, the cabinet is full, but somehow you still feel like you never have what you need. That's how clutter grows without us really noticing. Hidden, forgotten, repurchased, cluttered. And that's why one of the most useful ideas in Japanese-style organization isn't simply maximizing how much you can fit into a space. It's making sure you can actually see and reach what you already own. Take the cabinet under the kitchen sink. In a lot of homes, this area becomes a dumping ground. Spray bottles in the front, cleaning cloths somewhere in the back, trash bags stuffed into a corner, a sponge you forgot existed. And of course, all of it has to work around the plumbing. The cabinet may technically have plenty of room, but much of that room isn't easy to use. A sliding storage tower changes the experience completely. Instead of reaching into a dark cabinet and feeling around for what you need, the storage comes toward you. Pull it out, and suddenly the entire contents are visible. A second tier uses the vertical space above the bottles. Small trays separate sponges from cloths. Cleaning products can be grouped by purpose instead of piled together. And if the trays are removable, you can take the whole section out and clean underneath it in a few seconds. That's an important detail. Good storage shouldn't only make things easier to put away. It should also make the storage itself easy to clean. The same principle becomes even more valuable with seasonal items. Think about blankets, winter coats, spare bedding, or futons. You may only need them a few months out of the year. So keeping them in your everyday closet means they're taking up prime storage space while doing absolutely nothing. Japanese homes have long had to think carefully about seasonal storage because the same rooms and closets often need to serve different needs throughout the year. One solution is to move seasonal items into higher, lower, or less frequently accessed areas. Pull-down storage systems make upper spaces easier to reach. Instead of climbing up and wrestling a heavy box from above your head, the storage can come down closer to you. The advantage isn't just convenience. It means the high space actually gets used. We've all seen closets where the top shelf is technically storage, but nobody touches it because getting anything down is such a hassle. At that point, it's not really storage. It's just a place where things go to be forgotten. Underfloor compartments use the same logic in the opposite direction. Instead of adding another cabinet to the room, storage can be created beneath a surface you're already walking on. That kind of built-in system isn't something everyone is going to install, of course. But the idea behind it is worth borrowing. Not every item deserves eye-level storage. Things you use every day should be easy to see and easy to reach. Things you use once every few months can live farther away. The key is knowing exactly where they are. That's where defined zones become incredibly useful. Instead of one giant category called storage, give different areas a specific job. Daily cleaning supplies here, backup supplies there, winter bedding in one section, emergency items in another, frequently used clothing at eye level, seasonal clothing higher up or farther back. Once each zone has a purpose, putting things away becomes much easier because you don't have to make a new decision every time. And there's something else I really like about seasonal rotation. It forces you to revisit what you own. When winter ends, you don't just shove everything into a closet and forget about it. You take it out. You air it. You check its condition. You decide whether you still need it. Then, you store it deliberately. 6 months later, the process happens again. That simple rhythm prevents storage from turning into a one-way system where things go in but never come back out. And that's a trap a lot of us fall into. We organize something once and assume the job is finished. But good storage isn't static. It has to match the way your life changes. What you need in January isn't always what you need in July. What you use every morning shouldn't live behind something you touch twice a year. And what you've completely forgotten probably shouldn't be occupying your best storage space. So here's a simple test you can do in your own home. Open one cabinet. Open one drawer. Look inside your closet. If you have to remove 3 things just to reach a 4th, the problem probably isn't that you need more storage. The storage itself needs to be redesigned. Maybe that means adding a removable tray. Maybe it means dividing one deep shelf into 2 levels. Maybe it means moving seasonal items out of your daily zone. Or maybe it means simply bringing the things you use most often forward where you can see them. Because the best storage isn't the storage that holds the most. It's the storage that lets you know what you have, reach it without a struggle, and put it back without thinking. And once you understand that, something interesting happens. You often discover that you don't need another closet. You just need the closets you already have to stop hiding things from you. But there's another invisible enemy Japanese homes are often designed around. And unlike clutter, you can't put it in a basket, label it, or hide it behind a cabinet door. Moisture. And that brings us to something you can't organize into a basket. Moisture. If you've ever opened a closet and caught that slightly damp smell, noticed black spots forming around a bathroom corner, or pulled a towel off the rack, only to realize it still wasn't completely dry, you already know how frustrating moisture can be. The problem is that moisture rarely creates one chore. It creates a chain of them. A damp bathroom becomes mildew. A crowded wardrobe starts smelling musty. Wet towels stay wet longer. The cabinet under the sink develops that stale, closed-up smell. And once mold or odor appears, now you're scrubbing, spraying, washing, drying, and trying to figure out how to stop it from coming back. Japan has had to think about this problem for a long time. Summers can be hot and humid, the rainy season brings weeks of moisture, and many homes have limited space for large laundry rooms or outdoor drying. So, instead of treating humidity as something you deal with after the damage is done, Japanese home design often tries to manage it before it becomes a problem. That's a very different mindset. Don't keep fighting the mold. Change the conditions the mold likes. And most of the ideas come back to 4 simple things: airflow, drainage, separation, and drying speed. Let's start with wardrobes. A lot of people think the best way to use a closet is to fill every available inch. If there's a gap, put something in it. If a shelf isn't full, stack something higher. It feels efficient. But when clothing is packed tightly together, air has a harder time moving between fabrics. And in a humid environment, that's exactly what you don't want. Some Japanese storage systems use moisture control inserts, breathable dividers, or ventilation gaps to keep air circulating inside wardrobes and drawers. The technology can get sophisticated, but the principle is extremely simple. Clothes need breathing room too. You don't need a smart humidity drawer to copy that. Leave a little space between tightly packed garments. Avoid pressing storage boxes completely against a damp exterior wall. Use breathable containers for fabrics that stay stored for long periods. And if you live somewhere humid, check the back of your closet once in a while, not just the clothes you can see in front. That small habit can save you from discovering a much bigger problem months later. The cabinet under the sink deserves the same attention. It's one of those areas we tend to ignore until something smells wrong. You have plumbing, cleaning bottles, sponges, sometimes a small leak you don't notice immediately, and then we make it worse by packing the cabinet completely full. Now there's very little airflow, and moisture has nowhere to go. That's why ventilated storage trays and removable platforms make sense. They're not just there to make the cabinet look organized. They're there so air can move around the items, spills can be noticed quickly, and the entire area can be cleaned without dismantling half the kitchen. A simple version works too. Don't let wet sponges disappear into the back of a closed cabinet. Keep damp cloths away from dry paper products. And if a cabinet tends to stay humid, leave enough space around stored items for air to circulate. Again, the principle matters more than the gadget. Then there's laundry. This is where Japanese homes get especially practical. In a larger American house, you might have a dedicated laundry room, a dryer, or plenty of outdoor space. In a compact Japanese apartment, that space isn't always available, so drying has to become part of the architecture. Ceiling-mounted drying rails are a good example. Instead of keeping a bulky floor rack in the middle of the room, the rail uses the vertical space above you. Some systems retract when they're not needed. Others can be positioned closer to airflow or ventilation. The clever part isn't simply that the laundry is hanging from the ceiling. It's that the system gets wet fabric away from furniture, off the floor, and into a place where air can move around it. And that's one of the most important ideas in moisture control. Wet things need to dry quickly. A towel that dries in 2 hours is a very different hygiene problem from a towel that stays damp all day. The same applies to bathrooms. Japanese bathrooms often treat wet and dry areas as separate zones. Instead of pretending the whole bathroom is one identical space, the room is designed around the fact that water is going to be present. The shower area can get wet. The goal is to control where that water goes and how quickly it leaves. That means better drainage, surfaces that shed water efficiently, ventilation that continues after bathing, and a clearer separation between things that are meant to get wet and things that should stay dry. It's surprisingly logical when you think about it. If you know a floor will get soaked every day, don't design the routine around repeatedly rescuing that floor with a mop. Design the floor so the water doesn't stay there very long. Faster draining bathroom floors follow exactly that principle. Channels or subtle slopes guide water toward the drain instead of letting it sit in puddles. Some systems pair that with ventilation or floor drying. The result isn't that the bathroom magically never needs cleaning. It simply gives soap residue, moisture, and mold less time to settle in. And that's an important distinction. A well-designed home doesn't eliminate maintenance. It reduces the conditions that create unnecessary maintenance. You can borrow this idea without remodeling your bathroom. After a shower, help the room dry faster. Run the exhaust fan long enough to actually remove moisture. Leave the shower door or curtain positioned so air can circulate. Hang towels with enough space around them. Don't throw a damp bath mat into a corner. And if water consistently sits in the same place, deal with that spot instead of accepting it as normal. These sound almost too simple to matter, but that's exactly the point. A lot of good home design isn't dramatic. It's small systems preventing small problems from repeating every day. And if you want an easy way to remember all of this, think about those 4 words again. Airflow. Can air move around the things you're storing? Drainage. When water appears, does it have somewhere to go? Separation. Are wet items kept away from things that need to stay dry? Drying speed. How long does moisture remain in the room after you're finished using it? You don't need a sensor to answer those questions. You just need to pay attention to where your home stays damp. Because once moisture is trapped, cleaning becomes a reaction. You're constantly trying to catch up. But when moisture is allowed to leave quickly, the entire home becomes easier to maintain. That's one of the quiet lessons behind Japanese home design. Sometimes, the smartest way to clean something is to keep it from staying wet long enough to become dirty in the first place. A dry home is easier to keep clean than a wet home is to constantly rescue. And once you've dealt with what you can't see in the air, there's another kind of clutter worth talking about. The kind you can see everywhere. Cables, countertops, tools, and all the little things that make a room feel busy even when it's technically clean. There's another reason a room can feel messy even when it's technically clean. Visual noise. You may have wiped every surface. The floor may be spotless. There may not be a single piece of trash anywhere, and yet the room still feels busy. Why? Because your eyes are still being asked to process too much. A cable hanging under a desk, 3 chargers sitting on a countertop, a blender, toaster, coffee maker, knife block, and 5 other things permanently competing for space in the kitchen. Open shelves filled from edge to edge, cleaning tools, leaning against a wall. Nothing is necessarily dirty, but everything is visible, and visibility has a cost. Every object your eyes notice is one more small piece of information your brain has to process. That's one reason many Japanese-inspired interiors feel calmer than their size would suggest. The goal is not always to own fewer things. It is often to let fewer things remain visually active when they are not being used. Take cables. They're one of the easiest examples. Under a typical desk, you might have power cords, charging cables, a monitor cable, a lamp cord, and maybe a power strip hanging somewhere in the middle. You stop noticing them after a while, at least consciously. But visually, they are still there. And every time you vacuum, move your chair, or unplug something, they become a problem again. Some Japanese office and home systems solve this with flexible cable channels mounted underneath the desk. Instead of letting cords fall wherever gravity takes them, the cables are given a route. They follow one line. They stay off the floor. And when you need to change something, the channel can be opened, moved, or rearranged. That sounds like a small detail, but the difference between 5 visible cables and 1 clean line can completely change how a workspace feels. More advanced homes may take the idea further with hidden cable access under floors or inside built-in surfaces. You may never install anything like that in your own house, but the design lesson is still useful. Infrastructure does not need to disappear forever. It only needs to disappear when you are not using it. The same principle works in the kitchen. Countertops have a habit of becoming permanent parking lots. A toaster lives there because you use it sometimes. A blender lives there because moving it feels inconvenient. Then a coffee maker arrives. Then a container of utensils. Then mail. Then one package you meant to put away yesterday. And suddenly the kitchen is clean, but it doesn't feel clean. Some compact Japanese kitchen systems use wall-mounted or magnetic storage to move tools and smaller items off the counter. In more advanced designs, compatible accessories can attach to dedicated wall surfaces or rails. The countertop stays open while the things you need remain close enough to reach. Again, you don't need a specialty magnetic wall to use the idea. A simple rail, a few strong hooks, a wall-mounted knife strip, a narrow shelf. Even relocating one appliance that you use only twice a week can make a surprising difference. Because horizontal surfaces are valuable. The more of them you can leave open, the calmer the room tends to feel. And this is where retractable fixtures become interesting. A fixture that folds away, slides back, or disappears when it is not needed gives you something very valuable. Not just physical space, visual rest. A drying rack can exist when laundry is wet and disappear when the clothes are dry. A temporary shelf can come out when you need a work surface and fold away when you don't. A hook can hold something during the day and leave a clean wall at night. This is a subtle difference, but it changes the personality of a room. The room is allowed to return to neutral, and Japanese design often does the same thing with movement and sound. Think about a drawer that slams every morning, or a cabinet door that bangs shut every time someone reaches for a plate. Technically, that isn't clutter, but it is another form of environmental noise. Soft close hardware reduces that friction. More advanced dampers can keep drawers and doors moving smoothly even as the weight inside changes. The point isn't that every home needs expensive hardware. The point is that calm is created by more than appearance. A home can feel quieter because fewer things are visible, and it can feel quieter because fewer things literally make noise. That combination matters. When cabinets close gently, cables stay contained, countertops remain mostly open, and tools disappear when they are not needed, the house starts to feel less demanding. Nothing is shouting for attention. And that brings us to one of the easiest things you can try in your own home. Pick one horizontal surface. Just one. Your desk, your kitchen counter, your bathroom vanity. Now look at everything sitting on it and ask one question. Does this item actually need to live here permanently? Not, do I use it? You probably do. Ask whether it needs to remain visible 24 hours a day. That is a very different question. Maybe your coffee maker stays, but the blender moves into a cabinet. Maybe your toothbrush stays, but 3 backup products go into a drawer. Maybe your laptop stays on the desk, but the charger, external drive, loose cables, and headphones get routed underneath. You are not getting rid of your life. You are just deciding which parts of it need to stay on display. And that is where people sometimes misunderstand minimalism. The goal is not to make your home empty. An empty home can feel cold. The goal is to give your eyes fewer things to negotiate with. A few useful objects can still be visible. A plant, a lamp, a bowl you actually use, something beautiful that means something to you. But when every surface is filled, nothing gets to stand out. Your eyes keep moving because there is nowhere for them to stop. That is what visual noise does. And reducing it can change the feeling of a room long before you change the size of the room. So before buying another organizer, try something simpler. Clear one surface, hide one cable, move one rarely used appliance, put one group of tools behind a door instead of leaving them permanently exposed. Then walk out of the room. Come back 5 minutes later. Notice how different it feels. That feeling is the point. The goal isn't an empty home. It's a home where your eyes know where to rest. And once the room looks calmer, there's another place Japanese design often goes even further. The bathroom and the entryway. Because those are the 2 places where moisture, dirt, odor, and daily routines collide. If there are 2 places in a home where cleanliness can fall apart quickly, they're the entryway and the bathroom, and that makes sense. The entryway is where the outside world comes in. The bathroom is where water, heat, moisture, skin oils, towels, and everyday hygiene all collide. So, if you can control those 2 zones, you can prevent a surprising amount of cleaning everywhere else. That's something Japanese homes seem to understand very well. Instead of waiting for dirt, odor, and moisture to spread through the house, the smarter approach is to deal with them close to the source. Think of it this way. The traditional approach is, mess happens. Then you clean it. The preventive approach is, contain the mess, dry the moisture, control the odor, and reduce how much cleaning becomes necessary in the first place. The entryway is probably the clearest example. In Japan, the genkan is more than just a place where you happen to enter the house. It creates a boundary. Outside happens here. Inside begins there. Shoes stop at that boundary. And once you think about it, that's an incredibly effective cleaning strategy. Because one of the easiest ways to keep floors clean is to decide where outside dirt is allowed to stop. A lot of dirt in a home doesn't magically appear inside. We carry it in. Dust, mud, pollen, tiny particles from sidewalks and parking lots. Whatever is on the bottom of your shoes eventually ends up on the floor if there's no system stopping it. That's why Japanese entryway storage is often about more than simply hiding shoes. The better systems try to keep shoes organized, ventilated, and separated from the cleaner interior of the home. Some more advanced cabinets may include deodorizing, ventilation, filtration, or sanitation features. But you don't need a high-tech cabinet to borrow the basic idea. Create a clear shoe zone. Give frequently worn shoes a defined place. Let damp shoes dry before closing them inside a packed cabinet. Keep indoor slippers separate from outdoor footwear. And most importantly, make the clean side and the dirty side obvious. When the boundary is clear, people follow it almost without thinking. That's good design. You're not depending on everyone remembering a rule. The room itself is showing them what to do. The same thinking continues in the bathroom. Take towels. A towel that stays damp for hours doesn't just feel unpleasant, it can start to smell. And once that smell gets into the fabric, now the solution becomes more washing, more detergent, and more work. Heated towel bars are one way some modern Japanese bathrooms try to solve that problem. The point isn't really the warm towel. That's nice, of course. But the more practical benefit is drying. If you can get moisture out of the fabric faster, you give odor and mildew less time to develop. Some advanced systems combine gentle heat with ventilation or other air management features. Again, the lesson matters more than the hardware. A towel needs air around it. If you fold a wet towel over itself 3 times and leave it in a poorly ventilated room, it's going to stay wet longer. Spread it out, give it airflow. Let the bathroom continue ventilating after the shower ends. That one change can do more than another bottle of fragrance ever will. Because covering odor and preventing odor are 2 completely different things. Then there's the mirror. A normal bathroom mirror is passive. It hangs there. It fogs. It collects splashes. And whatever you store around it often ends up crowding the sink. Some modern Japanese bathroom systems make that area work harder. Retractable or adjustable mirrors can move closer when needed and return flush to the wall afterward. Integrated lighting reduces the need for extra lamps around the vanity. Storage can be built behind the mirror, so toothbrushes, razors, and small toiletries don't have to live permanently on the counter. And that connects directly to the idea we talked about earlier. Less visual noise, fewer wet objects sitting in the open, fewer surfaces crowded with things you have to move every time you wipe them down. A bathroom becomes easier to clean when you can actually reach the surfaces that need cleaning. That sounds obvious, but look at how many bathroom counters are covered with products. Every bottle becomes something you have to lift, wipe around, and put back. Sometimes the smartest bathroom upgrade is not another cleaning product. It's simply giving those products somewhere else to live. Now, move down to the floor. This is where preventive design becomes especially important. A shower floor is going to get wet. That isn't a failure. The question is, what happens next? Does the water sit there? Does it collect in corners? Does the bath mat stay damp for half the day? Or does the room help that water leave quickly? Japanese bathroom design often places a lot of attention on drainage and drying. Fast draining surfaces, well-positioned floor drains, ventilation, and clear wet and dry zones all work toward the same goal. Water is allowed to exist, it just isn't allowed to linger. That's a subtle but powerful difference. You're not fighting the fact that a bathroom gets wet, you're designing around it. And then there are the more advanced technologies. Self-cleaning or easier cleaning toilet surfaces, deodorizing systems, built-in rinsing features, special coatings designed to reduce residue. Some higher-end systems also use automated sanitation or air management technologies. These can sound almost futuristic, but the basic principle is actually very old-fashioned. Make dirt harder to hold onto, remove odor close to where it begins, and automate repetitive maintenance where it makes sense. What I would not do is treat every advanced feature as a weekend DIY project. Systems involving UV light, ozone, electrical heating, built-in sanitation, or modified plumbing should be professionally designed, properly installed, and used according to manufacturer guidance. You can borrow the philosophy without copying the technology, and that philosophy is simple. Control the problem as close to its source as possible. Shoes, stop the dirt at the entrance. Wet towels, dry them before they become musty. Bathroom humidity, vent it before it becomes condensation and mold. Water on the floor, give it a fast path to the drain. Toilets, use surfaces and systems that reduce how much residue stays behind. Once you begin thinking this way, cleaning starts to look different. You're not asking, how do I clean this faster? You're asking, how do I keep this from spreading? That question can change an entire house, because dirt that stays near the door doesn't reach the bedroom. Moisture that leaves the bathroom doesn't settle into the rest of the home. Odor that gets controlled at the source doesn't need to be covered later. And a surface that dries quickly gives grime less time to build up. So if you want to borrow one Japanese idea from this section, make it this one. Create boundaries. Decide where shoes stop, where wet things belong, where dry things stay dry, where bathroom products live when they're not being used, where water is supposed to go. The clearer those boundaries become, the less cleaning has to chase problems from room to room. Because the easiest dirt to clean is the dirt that never reaches the rest of your house. And once a home gets better at containing dirt and moisture, the next step is even more interesting. What if the house could also help you remember what you own, what you're running out of, and what needs to be used first? Once you start containing dirt, moisture, and visual clutter, another kind of household friction becomes easier to notice. The stuff you have to remember. What's almost out. What expires this week. What you already bought. What's hiding in the back of the refrigerator. What someone opened 3 days ago and forgot about. None of that sounds difficult, but together, those tiny decisions create a surprising amount of mental noise. And this is where some newer Japanese home systems become interesting. You'll see concepts like smart pantry inventory, expiration tracking, restocking reminders, and controlled refrigerator compartments. In some high-end or technology-focused homes, shelves or storage zones may be paired with sensors, labels, apps, or other tracking systems. The idea is simple. The home keeps track of information so the person living in it doesn't have to. Now, I want to be clear about something. You do not need an AI pantry to borrow this idea. In fact, I think the most useful part of the concept has almost nothing to do with artificial intelligence. It has to do with memory. Because one of the easiest ways to create waste is to depend entirely on your own memory. You buy yogurt. It gets pushed behind a container. You stop seeing it. A week later, you buy more yogurt. Then you discover the first one after it's already too late. Or you buy a second bottle of soy sauce because you couldn't remember whether there was one in the pantry. Then you come home and realize you already had two. Most of us have done some version of this. The problem isn't that we're careless. The problem is that the system is asking our brains to remember too much. A good storage system should reduce that burden. One simple Japanese-inspired idea is to organize food by what needs attention first, not just by category. That's a subtle difference. Most refrigerators are organized like a grocery store. Dairy here, vegetables there, sauces in the door, drinks on another shelf. That's useful, but it doesn't answer the question you actually ask every day. What should I use next? A simple Eat First box solves that. Anything that needs to be eaten soon goes into one visible container. Half a package of tofu, leftovers from last night, a container of cut fruit. The last serving of something you cooked 2 days ago. Now you don't have to scan the entire refrigerator every time you open it. The system has already made one decision for you. Eat this first. That may sound almost too basic, but that is often what good organization looks like. Not more complexity, fewer repeated decisions. The same idea works with older and newer food. When groceries come in, move older items forward. Put the new items behind them. Restaurants have used versions of this logic forever because it helps keep inventory moving. At home, it takes only a few seconds. And now the refrigerator is quietly reminding you what needs attention without sending a notification or lighting up a screen. You can do the same thing in the pantry. Keep duplicate items together. If you have 3 cans of tomatoes, don't let one live on the top shelf, another behind the pasta, and another in a completely different cabinet. Put them together. Now you can see your real inventory at a glance. That visibility matters. Because when duplicates are scattered around the house, you don't experience them as duplicates. You experience them as things you forgot you owned. And that brings us back to a principle from earlier. Hidden becomes forgotten. Forgotten becomes purchased again. And purchased again becomes clutter. Smart pantry systems try to solve that digitally, but grouping things physically can solve a surprising amount of the same problem. Another useful tool is a single, visible restock list, not 3 notes on your phone, not a piece of paper in the kitchen and another list in your bag. One place. When the last backup item gets opened, it goes on the list. When the coffee is getting low, it goes on the list. When you use the final can of something, it goes on the list. Again, the point is not sophistication. The point is removing the need to keep a mental list running in the background all day. That's what good systems do. They turn memory into environment. Expiration tracking works the same way. A smart appliance might track dates automatically, but you can get much of the benefit with a marker and a label. Write the date you opened something. Put the oldest food in front. Keep the items that need to be used soon in one place. The system does not need to be impressive. It needs to be obvious. And then there are controlled refrigerator compartments. Some modern designs use dedicated or restricted zones for specific foods. That may mean separating prepared meals from ingredients, keeping certain foods in a more controlled environment, or limiting access to particular compartments. You may never need biometric locks on your refrigerator. Most people probably won't, but there's still a useful idea underneath all that technology. Different food has different jobs. Food you plan to eat tonight should not be competing visually with food you bought for next week. Prepared lunches should have a clear zone. Snacks can have a clear zone. Ingredients for dinner can have a clear zone. And the moment everything has a role, the refrigerator becomes much easier to read. You stop opening the door and staring at 20 things while trying to decide what to do. That matters more than it seems. Because every time your home forces you to make a tiny decision, it uses a little attention. Where does this go? Do we have another one? Is this still good? What should I eat first? Do I need to buy more? One decision is nothing. 50 small decisions throughout the day feel very different. That's why I think one of the best definitions of good organization is this. It reduces the number of decisions you have to make more than once. If you already decided where something belongs, the system should remember that decision. If you already decided what gets used first, the shelf should make that obvious. If you already know when something needs replacing, the list should hold that information for you. Your brain has better things to do than remember whether there's another jar of mustard behind the cereal. So here's a simple version you can try without buying a single smart device. Create one eat first zone in your refrigerator. Move older food forward. Group duplicates together. Before grocery shopping, take 30 seconds to look at what you already have and keep one restock list in one obvious place. That's it. No sensors, no subscription, no app required. You're simply building a home that remembers a little more so you can remember a little less. And that's the deeper lesson behind the smartest Japanese-inspired systems. Technology is useful when it removes friction, but a good system can do the same thing with a box, a label, and a clear rule. Smart living doesn't begin when every appliance connects to your phone. It begins when your home stops asking your brain to remember things the system could remember for you. And once a home starts doing that, there's another question worth asking. What if one room could also stop having just one job? There's another way Japanese homes create more space without actually becoming larger. They let the same space do more than one job. That sounds simple, but it changes the way you think about furniture. In a large house, it's easy to dedicate one room to one purpose. A home office is for work, a dining room is for eating, a guest room waits for guests, a laundry room handles laundry. But in a small home, every room you dedicate to one activity has a cost, not necessarily a financial cost, a space cost. And sometimes that cost is bigger than the price of the furniture itself. That's why flexible furniture has played such an important role in Japanese living. The goal isn't always to squeeze more objects into a room. It's to let the room change depending on what time of day it is. The kotatsu is a perfect example. Traditionally, it's a low table with a heating element underneath and a blanket around the sides. In winter, people gather around it to eat, talk, read, or simply stay warm. But the deeper idea is more interesting than the table itself. One piece of furniture supports several parts of daily life. Now imagine a modern version. It's 8 in the morning. Someone sits down at the table with a laptop. A small compartment opens. The laptop stand comes up. A charging cable is already routed underneath. Maybe there's a drawer for notebooks or headphones. For the next several hours, that table is a workspace. Nothing about the room needs to permanently look like an office. Then the workday ends. The laptop closes. The stand folds down. The cables disappear. A few seconds later, the same surface is ready for dinner. Later that night, the table becomes a place to sit with family, drink tea, watch television, or relax under the warmth of the kotatsu. Same room, same table, 3 different lives. Morning, workspace, evening, dining area, night, relaxation space. That is time-based zoning. Instead of giving every activity its own permanent room, you let one space change jobs throughout the day. And for a small home, that can be incredibly powerful, because a room that changes function feels larger than a room that is locked into one purpose. You can see the same thinking in modular tatami spaces. Tatami is often described as flooring. But in practice, a tatami area can do much more than that. It can be a place to sit during the day, a play area for children, a quiet place to read. And later, with bedding brought out, the same area can become a sleeping space. In the morning, the bedding is stored away, and the room opens back up again. The room didn't physically grow. It simply stopped being defined by one activity. That distinction matters. A lot of Western homes solve changing needs by adding rooms. Japanese small space design often solves them by changing how the same room is used. Retractable drying systems follow the same logic. When laundry is wet, a ceiling rail comes down and the room becomes part of the drying process. Once the laundry is dry, the rail disappears. The room returns to normal. A permanent floor rack would continue occupying space whether you needed it or not. A retractable system only asks for space while it is actually working. Temporary window shelves work the same way. Maybe you need a small surface near the window in the morning. You put down a cup of coffee. You water a plant. You set a book there for a few minutes. Then the shelf folds away. The window returns to being a window. You gained a function without permanently giving up the space. And that's the important idea. In a compact home, flexibility is often more valuable than capacity. A huge piece of furniture may hold more things, but a flexible piece of furniture can make the entire room useful in more ways. The same goes for storage platforms. A raised tatami platform, for example, can provide seating on top while hiding storage underneath. One surface serves two purposes at the same time. Or the storage can support different seasons: futons in winter, fans in summer, guest bedding when family visits, emergency supplies the rest of the year. Again, the point is not that everyone should build a tatami platform in their living room. The point is to ask a better question before buying furniture. Instead of asking, "What piece of furniture do I need for this activity?" ask, "Can something I already have support this activity too?" That question can save a surprising amount of space. Maybe your dining table can become a work surface during the day. Maybe a bench can also store blankets. Maybe an ottoman can hold seasonal items. Maybe a wall-mounted desk can fold away when work is over. Maybe a guest room does not need to remain a guest room 365 days a year. A room can change. Furniture can change. And your home can follow the rhythm of your life instead of forcing your life to follow the layout of your home. There's also a psychological benefit to this. Physical changes can create mental boundaries. If you work from home, you probably know how strange it can feel when work never really ends. The laptop is still sitting there. The cables are still visible. The desk is still waiting for you. Even after dinner, the room continues, reminding you of unfinished work. But imagine closing the workstation at the end of the day. The laptop disappears. The surface changes. The room changes with it. That small physical transition tells your brain something important. Work is over. Now this space belongs to another part of your life. You don't necessarily need another room to create that feeling. Sometimes you just need a clear transition. That may be one reason transformable spaces feel so satisfying. They don't simply save square footage. They help separate moments. And that brings us back to one of the bigger lessons running through all of these Japanese-inspired ideas. A small home doesn't become comfortable by forcing more things into it. It becomes comfortable when the space can adapt. When a room works differently in the morning than it does at night. When furniture appears only when it is useful. When storage hides beneath surfaces instead of surrounding you. And when 1 square foot can serve more than one part of your life. That is why furniture that does only one thing can become expensive in a small home. Not because it costs too much money, because it costs too much space. So, if you want to borrow this idea, look around one room in your home and ask, What is this room doing when I'm not using it for its main purpose? Could a desk disappear after work? Could a bench store something? Could a dining table serve another purpose during the day? Could one piece of furniture replace two? You don't have to add a single square foot. You just have to let the square feet you already have work at different times. And when a home learns to change with you, something interesting happens. It starts feeling bigger without actually getting bigger. But the most powerful Japanese design idea may go one step further. Because eventually, the question stops being, how much can this room do? And becomes, how does this room make me feel? By this point, you may have noticed something. The smartest Japanese home ideas are not always the ones with the most technology. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a room can do is simply make you feel different, calmer, less rushed, less distracted, less like the house itself is asking something from you. And that brings us to a deeper question. Japanese home design does not only ask, where should this object go? It can also ask, how should this space make me feel? That question changes everything. Because once you start designing for a feeling, not just a function, you stop trying to fill every empty place. You become more selective. You pay more attention to what is visible. You start thinking about light, texture, sound, natural materials, and even the space between objects. One of the clearest examples is the tokonoma. Traditionally, a tokonoma is a small alcove used to display something chosen with care, maybe a hanging scroll, a flower arrangement, a seasonal branch, a ceramic object. The important part is what is not there. It is not crowded with 10 decorations competing for attention. Usually, the display is limited. That limitation gives the object more presence. If you place one beautiful vase on a quiet surface, you notice it. If you place that same vase between 15 other objects, it becomes part of the background. The object did not change. Your attention did. And that is one of the quiet lessons Japanese interiors can teach us. More decoration does not always create more beauty. Sometimes it creates less attention. This is also where seasonal rotation becomes interesting. In many homes, decorating tends to be additive. A new season arrives, so we add something. Then another holiday comes, and we add something else. Eventually, shelves and tables collect layers of decoration from different moments of the year. The Japanese-inspired approach can be almost the opposite. Instead of adding more, you replace. Spring arrives, and one small display changes, a branch, a flower, a lighter textile. Summer comes, and the room becomes simpler and cooler in feeling. Autumn brings a different texture or color. Winter becomes warmer and quieter. The home changes with the season without becoming more crowded. And there is something surprisingly satisfying about that, because rotating objects forces you to make a choice. What deserves to be visible right now? Everything else can rest. That word matters. Rest. Objects can rest. Rooms can rest. And your eyes can rest too. Natural materials help create that feeling. Tatami, wood, paper, woven fibers, simple ceramics. These materials do not usually demand attention in the same way a bright screen or a crowded shelf does. They add texture without adding much visual noise. You notice them slowly. The grain of wood, the weave of a mat, the changing color of natural light across a wall. Nothing is shouting. And that brings us to one of the most important Japanese ideas in this entire video, ma. Ma is often translated simply as empty space, but that explanation misses something important. Ma is not empty space because someone forgot to put something there. It is intentional space, a pause, the space between things that allows the things around it to be noticed. Think about music. If every second were filled with sound, there would be no rhythm. The silence between notes is part of the music. A room can work the same way. The empty section of a wall can make one piece of art feel more important. The open space around a table can make the room feel easier to move through. A shelf with 3 objects can sometimes feel more complete than a shelf with 30. The space is not wasted. The space is doing something. It is creating contrast. It is giving the room breathing room. And it is giving your attention somewhere to stop. That may be why certain Japanese interiors feel calm, even when there is nothing obviously luxurious about them. The furniture may be simple, the materials may be quiet, there may not be much decoration, but the room does not force your eyes to keep moving. And if you have ever walked into a room filled with things, you know the opposite feeling. Your eyes bounce from one object to another. A stack of books, a basket, a framed photo, a cable, a lamp, a pile of mail, another shelf, another decoration. Nothing is wrong with any individual item. But together, they keep your attention moving. When every corner is filled, your eyes never really stop working. Empty space gives attention somewhere to rest. And that brings us to the idea of a quiet corner. It does not have to be a dedicated meditation room. Most people do not have the space for that. It can be much smaller. A chair near a window, a section of tatami, a corner with one lamp and no television, a small bench, a place where the phone does not automatically follow you. The purpose is not to perform relaxation perfectly. The purpose is simply to create one part of the home that asks less from you. No work waiting there, no pile to sort, no screen demanding a response. No 10 objects reminding you of 10 different tasks, just a place where the environment becomes quieter. And I think this is where all the earlier ideas in the video start to connect. Why hide cables? Why clear the countertop? Why give every object a defined place? Why use furniture that disappears when the job is finished? Why rotate seasonal objects instead of constantly adding more? Why keep moisture, dirt, and clutter from spreading? Because all of those choices do more than make a home easier to clean. They reduce how much the home asks you to notice. That may be the deepest form of organization, not organizing more things, organizing your attention. And once you understand that, the goal of a Japanese-inspired home starts to look very different. It is not about making every room empty. It is not about getting rid of everything you love. And it is definitely not about turning your home into a showroom. It is about being deliberate. What deserves to stay visible? What can disappear when it is not needed? What should this room help me do? And maybe even more importantly, how should I feel when I walk into it? Sometimes the most valuable thing you can add to a room is nothing. One empty shelf, one clear corner, one quiet wall, one place where your eyes are not being asked to process anything. That emptiness is not unfinished. It is the pause that allows everything else to matter. And maybe that is the real luxury Japanese homes have been pointing toward all along. Not more space, not more technology, not more things, more room to breathe. After looking at all of these ideas, it would be easy to walk away thinking the lesson is that you need better cabinets, smarter appliances, hidden rails, special bathroom systems, or some expensive piece of Japanese hardware. But that's not really the point. You don't need to copy 25 products. You need to copy the thinking behind them. Because once you strip away the technology, the materials, and the clever mechanisms, most of these homes are following the same few principles over and over again. The first is simple. Use the space you already have before adding more. Look up. Look behind doors. Look under benches. Look inside cabinets. Look at vertical walls. Before you buy another shelf or another storage cart, Ask whether the surfaces you already own are doing enough. A small home can feel surprisingly generous when fewer areas are wasted. The second principle is visibility. The things you use often should be easy to see, easy to reach, and easy to put back. If something disappears into the back of a cabinet, it eventually disappears from your memory too. And once that happens, you start buying things you already own. You create duplicates. You create clutter. You create more work. So don't organize only for capacity. Organize for retrieval. If you have to move 3 things just to reach a fourth, that storage system is probably asking too much from you. The third principle is prevention. This may be the most important one. Don't wait for dirt, moisture, odor, or mold to become a cleaning problem. Stop them earlier. Shoes, stop at the entrance. Wet towels get enough airflow to dry. Bathroom water has a clear path to the drain. Damp items stay away from dry storage. Countertops stay open enough to wipe without moving 10 objects first. The smartest cleaning system is often the one that gives you less to clean later. The fourth principle is flexibility. A room does not have to do one job forever. A table can be a workspace in the morning and a place for dinner at night. A bench can also be storage. A drying rack can appear when you need it and disappear when you don't. A quiet corner can become a place to read, rest, or simply sit without a screen. You don't always need more square footage. Sometimes you need the square footage you already have to work at different times. And the fifth principle ties everything together. Remove friction from the things you repeat. That's really what all of this comes down to. Think about the small frustrations that happen in your home every single day. The drawer you have to dig through, the cable you keep untangling, the shoes that never seem to have a place, the wet bathroom corner you wipe over and over again, the bottle you keep moving every time you clean the counter, the food you forget in the back of the refrigerator. None of these problems is dramatic, but that's exactly why we tolerate them. They're small enough to ignore and frequent enough to quietly drain us. So tonight, don't reorganize your entire house. Don't buy 20 containers. Don't empty every closet onto the floor and turn your weekend into a project. Just find one friction point. One place where you repeatedly search for something. One place where you always have to bend, move, wipe, untangle, rearrange, or put something back in the wrong place. Then ask yourself one question. How could I make this problem happen less often? Maybe you move the item closer. Maybe you add one hook. Maybe you remove one unnecessary object. Maybe you create an eat first box in the refrigerator. Maybe you give your shoes a clear stopping point at the entrance. Maybe you clear one section of your kitchen counter and decide it stays clear. Maybe you stop storing something where it has always been stored and put it where you actually use it. That's enough. Fix one small friction point, then live with the change for a week. If it makes life easier, keep it. Then find the next one. That is how a home gradually starts working with you instead of against you. And I think that's the real lesson behind all of these Japanese-inspired ideas. The goal isn't to own nothing. It isn't to make every room look like a showroom. It isn't to hide every sign that a real person lives there. A home should still feel lived in. It should have books, photos, food, clothes, things you love, things you actually use. The goal is simply to make sure those things are not constantly demanding your attention. A good home should not make you feel like there is always another small problem waiting to be solved. It should quietly support the way you live. It should make the right action easier. Make clutter harder to create. Make cleaning easier to finish. Make things easier to find. And give your eyes and your mind somewhere to rest. That's why the most useful Japanese home idea may not be a product at all. It may be a question. What in this room is making my life harder than it needs to be? Ask that question often enough, and you start seeing your home differently. Not as a collection of rooms you have to maintain, but as a system that can either create friction or remove it. And when the system gets better, something else changes too. You spend less time looking for things, less time moving things, less time cleaning up the same problems, less time thinking about the house itself. And that gives you something far more valuable than a perfectly organized drawer. It gives you attention back, time back, a little more calm. A Japanese-inspired home isn't one that looks perfect. It's one that asks less of you every day. Because in the end, clean isn't about perfection. It's about peace.